no, this is love. For the first time, I had someone complimenting me and telling me I'm beautiful, and telling me how much they love little cute things that I do. Like I love to sing and I love to dance, and I make up songs all the time, and he still to this day just loves that, like he'll just like just start singing and dancing all over the place, and he's just like, I just love you. I just love that. Like I was accepted for me. I was
Oh,
accepted.
that is a big one. Acceptance for me as I am without
Yes.
having to change anything about me. Hey team, welcome back to Trauma Agility. Today we have Yvonne Sandomir. She's an author of The Invisible Girl. And I love to have you on the show, Yvonne. Thank you so much for coming. How are
Thank you
you?
so much for having me. I'm wonderful. It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So I got a copy of The Invisible Girl and I was looking through what you were writing, and it's a memoir of your life, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So what made you decide to write this book?
So I knew at the age of 10 that I was going to write this book. I knew at the age of 10 that it would be titled The Invisible Girl. And I knew that I would write the book to help other people overcome what I was going through. At 10 years old, I knew that I wasn't living the life that I was meant to live. At 10
Wow.
years old, I knew that I would have to eventually, when I was able to, make decisions to get out of the situation that I was in.
And what were some of those situations that you found yourself in?
Unfortunately, my father was an alcoholic. He was very abusive towards my mom. So I endured a lot of witnessing domestic violence from practically birth until they divorced. In between there, though, however, between the ages of 4 and 14, I endured probably a dozen molestations, rapes, assaults, etc. And in particular between the ages of 11 and 14 were the most horrendous years. So I decided to title the book The Invisible Girl because, unfortunately, even though I endured all of those things, I had no one around me to protect me. I had no one to turn to. Unfortunately, sexual abuse where I'm from is minimized. It doesn't seem to be a big deal to people.
Hmm.
It's very much swept under the rug. And unfortunately, my parents and those around me even forgave and remained friends with one of my actually multiple perpetrators. So that was very confusing for me. And
Wow.
growing up in the deep South, it was kind of wrapped up in religion too, which was a little bit which was a little bit confusing. We were raised Baptist, and we were raised only God can judge. That's why we have to forgive your perpetrator. That's why we can't judge your perpetrator. But yet they'd see a stranger walking down the street in short shorts and a crop top, and it's, look at that whore walking down the street.
Yes.
So it
Ah.
was very contradictory. And
Mhm.
I couldn't understand how they could forgive someone that hurt me, that harmed me, but yet, and they couldn't judge them, but they could judge the stranger on the street. A lot of it was wrapped up in, well, they found God now. They found God
Mm.
now, so they're forgiven of their past.
As a little girl going through these traumas, and did people know around you that these traumas were happening to you?
They did not, and that's because they
Mhm.
weren't around.
Oh,
They weren't around to protect me. I
right.
was on my own. I had no supervision. I didn't have a curfew. We would have random people in and out of our house all the time. Uh, in particular, at one point, my mom and stepdad invited a hitchhiker to live with us, and he ended up raping me. And it was very, think of it like it was very communal. It was like, in the way, and what I mean by that is, if that person could help them, then they would be willing to forgive whatever it is that they did wrong because they could help them, if that makes sense.
Now we're going into the narratives of,
Yes.
yeah. So your parents had a narrative, the people around you had a narrative, and then you had a narrative. And I really love what one of the narratives that you developed at a young age it was, because it's not common when they do this to me. How many other people are they doing it to? And I can't be the only one, because oftentimes the narrative that we tell ourselves is, I am the only one.
Right.
Or, yeah, or this is normal to me and this is happening to me. My parents are okay with this, so therefore I must be okay with this too. But you had that like fighter spirit of, no, this is not okay.
I did. Don't get me wrong. There were periods. There was after, I think probably between 12 and 14, I kind of got to the point where I was like, you know what? My parents are right. My parents are right. I don't have to worry about this. I don't have to think about it, whatever, God will judge them, whatever. But one thing that I wanted to go back to is you started to ask me how I felt about them forgiving perpetrators and yet giving the contradictory, but they can judge a stranger on the street.
Right.
How that made me feel, I felt infuriated. I didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time. I know it now that I was infuriated. But at the time, I had to rationalize it somehow.
Right.
I had to somehow make sense of all the nonsense that was going on around me. And it wasn't just strangers or neighbors. It was also family. I'm a survivor of incest as well. So not only did I have strangers that my parents forgave, however, I would still have to sit across Thanksgiving dinner table and face one of my uncles that molested me for many years, because my family didn't think that it was a big deal. They just expected me to forgive him the way that they did. But this is something that I really need to say about forgiveness. Forgiveness is absolutely for the survivor. But what I want to say is, survivors do not owe their perpetrators forgiveness. They don't owe them anything. However, if a person who has harmed you shows actionable, changed behavior, they take responsibility for what they did to you, they acknowledge what they did to you, that person deserves forgiveness. Not the creepy uncle that nobody ever talks about, that just because he found God, now he deserves forgiveness. That is such a slap in the face to survivors, because what people don't understand is the lifelong effects that this type of trauma has on people. They don't realize it stays for a lifetime. It stays with you.
And it changes your brain.
It changes everything. And we don't get forgiveness. We don't get reprieve from anything. So why should the perpetrator get it? So that's always been my thought process on forgiveness. Because growing up, it was, you have to forgive everybody. You have to, because forgiveness is for you, they would say. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is for you. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be ready to forgive until someone freaking apologizes to me first.
Right.
Or shows some type of acknowledgement of what they did. And it was just this, for whatever reason, it was, and I'm telling you, here's the thing. This is what I realized. Generational curses, or not curses rather, but trauma.
Generational trauma. That's the thing. Yep.
Generational trauma.
Yep.
Generational trauma, that this has been going on for generations with my family. My grandmother had been abused. Other people in my family had been abused, going back and back and back. And and actually one thing that my grandmother said to me when I actually told her what my uncle had done was, well, it happened to me when I was younger too, and I just got over it.
Oh, the worst thing that they can say.
The worst thing. And I just have to say, nobody just gets over being abused.
Right.
That is a narrative that you tell yourself so you don't have to face the pain of what you went through.
There's a lot of narratives being developed in these traumas, right? Like the narrative of, I can't be the only one. The narrative of I must forgive. And a lot of people think that forgiveness is acceptance or agreeance. And it really isn't. It's more of a pact that you bring with yourself that releases the pain. And it releases you from pain and it gives you control back, but you don't have to accept or agree with what happened.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then the narrative of other people of like, well, discounting, invalidation of, well, it happened to me, so you should just get over it. And language. This brings me to another thing. Language is so unbelievably important when dealing and processing trauma, because if you use just little words here and there, get over it instead of get through it. Get through it. Over means like I need to
skip over it,
right? Like I don't matter.
Right.
And my experiences don't matter.
Yes.
And the things that I went through don't matter.
Yes. That's right. And I did feel like, and see, this is where the pattern goes. So as a kid, as I was going through it, I was the happiest child you would ever have met. I didn't walk into a room without a smile on my face. I was always in a good mood. And so sadly, my mom would say, well, I just didn't know because you were so happy.
Mm-hmm.
No, you didn't know because you weren't there. You don't know because you weren't there to protect me.
And there's also a narrative there that says, well, how do I protect me? And when you were saying before that you were infuriated going through these things and you're showing it as happiness, as joy, put a fake face on because, no one can know about this. And I'm supposed to, or I should, there's that word, right? I should act a specific way. And don't let anybody into my feelings because they're not going to help anyway.
Exactly. But also, I did reach a point where I felt like that was my purpose. It happened so much that probably between the ages of 13 and 15, I was just like, I would just throw my hands up. And at that point, just, oh, well, just must be my purpose. This just must be what I'm meant to do. And then at that point, that's when I went into, I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving of justice. I'm not deserving of this. I'm not deserving of being in a happy, healthy relationship. And what that led to was me leaving home at the age of 15 and actually meeting a man who was 10 years older than me. At the time, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in love. This man, oh, I'm in love. He's going to come change my life. He's older. He has more wisdom.
He's my protector.
He's my protector. He's my savior. He's going to come pull me away from all of this. Well, sadly now, looking back, I realized that he was just another sexual predator.
Yeah.
He was a sexual predator that I fell in love with. That became love. It became love. Abuse became love. Because sadly, he became physically abusive, mentally abusive, and he turned out to be a crack cocaine addict. And I had no idea. And so here I am, I found out, he was addicted by the time I was 16. So here I am, a 16-year-old kid dealing with a full-on relationship with drug addiction, domestic violence, again, more poverty, more hurt, more pain, more everything. And I'm like, and here's the thing. I've always believed, I don't believe it anymore because we know it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Love is so powerful, it can change anything. Mm-hmm. And so in these relationships, I would say, if I love him enough, and if I stay with him and I show him how much I love him, that will change his heart, because he's just never been loved before. That's right. All. They've just never been loved before. And the reason that I was doing that is because I had never been loved before.
Because your definition of love was safety.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so I would try to be affectionate and show love because that's what I wanted in return, but it wasn't reciprocated. So I was basically putting out what I wanted to get back, but I wasn't getting it back because I was in unhealthy situations and unhealthy relationships. So once I finally left that relationship, I really didn't even face my trauma until I was in my 30s. After that, it was just like, okay, forget about it. You move on with life. I went on to get married. I had a couple of kids. I had a divorce. I was in a 5-year mind control situation with a very sadistic, cruel man that, again, I loved him so much. Like, he just needs love. He's never been loved. I'm going to love him so much, and he's going to reciprocate it. So after I finally left that relationship and I actually met the love of my life, and I met a man that loved me and cared for me, was everything that I could have ever possibly imagined. And the interesting thing about trauma, and this is one thing that I wanted to get into, is that a lot of people, their trauma tends to come back when they're at their happiest moment.
Yes, it does.
Trauma tends to come back when you feel safe, when you feel like you're in a space to actually confront it. And that's what happened with me. When I met my husband, he's now my husband, I was working a sales job, earning almost 6 figures a year in the in the hospitality industry. I would go to work every day, designer clothes, dressed to the nine, hair, makeup done every day, on point. Just, that was me. That's what I had created for myself. Once I got out of all the craziness, I created, okay, now I need a career. Now I need an apartment. And I went for those things. But it was when I was at the height of my success that I crashed.
Self-sabotage.
Well, when I say crash, I don't mean self-sabotage. I mean triggers started coming. Triggers, dissociation, flashbacks. I started getting hammered with that. So much to the point that I would stay in my room. I wouldn't change my clothes. It got to the point where I wasn't going to work. And my husband went from having this happy-go-lucky professional woman to now someone who had really regressed back to a child.
Why do you think that happened?
That happened because I had a phone call with my mom. So interestingly enough, and something that, and I know you know this, big events tend to trigger things. I was planning to marry the love of my life. And 2 months before the wedding, I received a phone call from my mom. And it was a normal phone call. But then she started, talking about, well, I'm worried. I don't think people can afford the hotel room and, all of this. And she suggested pitching tents in our backyard for people to sleep in. And, I was like, Mom, I don't think that's going to be a good idea. We already have people here. There's not going to be enough space. We don't have enough bathroom space, the whole nine.
Right.
And all it took was one comment. She said to me, now see, now my mind's trying to block it out. You see how the psyche works? Now my mind's trying to block it out.
Yep.
But she said to me, you've changed. Ever since you've been with Matt, you've changed. And something about that hit me. And I was like, you know what? I have changed, and it was almost like she was putting me down for changing. That's not the word I want to use, but criticizing me for changing when that was a positive thing.
Right.
That I had changed. But in that moment, now you have to remember, I don't remember this. So what I'm saying from this point on is from what my husband has told me.
Yep.
So at that moment, I just said, I have to go. And I hung up the phone and I immediately crashed to the floor. And I started pulling my hair and in a childlike voice, recalling all of the things that had happened to me one by one.
Yeah.
And it's like hearing my mom say, you've changed since you've been there. It's almost like it hit me because she hasn't. She hasn't changed. And in that moment, it triggered, like, this is the wedding. She was supposed to support me and be supportive and whatever I needed. It's like, whatever you need, babe, it's your wedding. But for her to criticize me when I had never criticized her for all of the things that I had been through, it was like in that moment, I was like, how dare you? You want to talk about, people changing and, and it's just, so I went through this and I regressed. And from that point on, I was isolating in my bedroom. I wouldn't get dressed. I wouldn't shower. And it came to a point where my husband had to say to me, well, he wasn't even my husband at that point. My fiance at the time had to say to me, I don't even think that you can work right now. Like, you need therapy, because I had never been to therapy before. And he's like, you need therapy. And I'm like, I can do this on my own because I've always done it on my own, right? I've always conquered. I've always, I got that job that I wanted. I had that successful marriage that I wanted until it was unsuccessful and and we divorced. But it was successful for a while, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just became a different person. And my husband actually, or my fiance at the time, actually, he's the one that found my therapist.
Oh.
He went online and he basically printed out a list of therapists and said, you have to look at this. You have to go to therapy because this is not you. You have to get help for this.
Now, a lot of people that experience these things, these trauma flashbacks, these triggers, and something so subtle of like, you changed, right? That's interesting.
Yes.
Because it has nothing to do with the current situation, but that one word triggered a regression. And that's exactly what that is. Because when we have trauma, it gets stored into our bodies and our cells. Memories get stored into our cells. And so our body reacts, thanks vagus nerve, to the trigger as if it were happening again. And we oftentimes just shut down our prefrontal cortex, and we're in our midbrains, and our midbrain says, okay, what is familiar and how do I act in this scenario? And if you regress to when you were a child, I mean, that's how you're going to react. That's how you're going to act. You're going to pull your hair. That's the anxiety of it. And the things that you were experiencing led to the depression after that. Because if you think about it, so many chemicals are released at that one time, adrenaline, cortisol, that are just flooding your system with these fight, flight, freeze, fawn chemicals. And then after that, you're depleted. And so the depression comes and you start to really not take care of yourself. You're
right. And we have to remind people that depression is anger turned inward. Depression is anger turned inward. For me, I can say that.
Yeah.
I found that for me, my depression was anger that I had for everybody else that I internalized. And I justified what they did and I made excuses because that was easier, because also I had abandonment issues. I didn't want to lose anybody. I didn't have a family. It was like all I had. So, it's fighting, not wanting to lose these people that I love, but in this moment, I can't be around them. Their presence is too triggering for me, their presence. So when that happened with my mom, now remember, this was, 1 month before my wedding that this happened. Okay. So this happened and I'm clearly not myself. And so the month comes in, the wedding rolls around, all the families in there, and I become bridezilla the freaking year, the day of the wedding, because I'm so stressed and people are complaining about paying for hotel rooms. And I'm like, can you guys just like not complain and just, you got to pay for the hotel room. You just got to do it anyway. So why are you complaining about it? But seeing people that I hadn't seen in such a long time, I hadn't been around these people. So from being triggered by that, now being in front of these people and having to deal with them and put on a face like everything is okay. After the wedding is when I really, really crashed with suicidal ideations, suicide attempts. I multiple times tried to commit suicide. And thanks to my husband for really encouraging me and pushing me to find therapy, I finally took his advice and I called a therapist. And ever since then, I've now been in therapy for going on 7 years. I still go twice a week, every week. I have been for almost 7 years now, and it has absolutely changed my life. And this is what I want to say about the healing part of the trauma. When this process started, I dreaded it. I dreaded stepping into the therapist office. I dreaded having to talk about all of the things that happened to me. I dreaded it. I thought that therapy was going to be miserable. I thought therapy would just be, it's just going to be nothing but, tears and sadness and bad memories and bad things. But what I've learned over time, and this is what I want people to really hear about therapy, is that it's also the place where I've had some of my best laughs.
Yeah.
Some of like my deepest laughs, some of my best epiphanies, some of the most impactful self-awareness has come from that therapy. And that's what healing is all about.
One thing that I say to my clients when they come in, first thing off the bat, after I go after my like little spiel, the legal spiel that I have to do, right? After that, it's like, well, what's good in your life? Because a lot of the times people come into therapy and they say, well, I need to focus on the bad in order to function. And not necessarily. You focus on all of it and you focus it in on it of what is intensest. Is that a word? It is now. More intense. They focus on what's more intense and what is holding you back, but what also drives you forward.
Right, because that's what you have to get to. You have to know what drives you forward before you can start moving, right? Before you can start pedaling, you've got to know which direction you're going. So that's all part of it. It's what do you want from life? What is your goal from therapy? What is it that you want to achieve? What is your greatest achievement now? And how do you want to improve that? How do you want to grow as a person? It's not just, let's just dig into your past. It's about who you want to be and who you want to become. And you have to really figure that out before you can really start working on anything. Because to really work on it, you have to know who you are to know where you're going. Now, with that said, I have to say, for many years, it was touch and go. For many years, it was just, I didn't know what I was doing there. It was just all, it seemed to be, all sadness. But that's because I hadn't discovered yet where I wanted to go. But once I discovered who I was, and I got through all the shame and the blame and all of the distorted beliefs that I had instilled in myself and my family instilled in me, it's once I realized and I became aware to those things that I was able to change it. Dr. Phil says this, if you ever know Dr. Phil.
Love Dr. Phil.
I do too. I'm going to do the accent and everything. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. And you can't. It's true. You can't change anything that you don't acknowledge. And you can't, unless you acknowledge what it is that you need to change. So it's, for so long, it's just, I felt like I was just like in this pool of misery, just like swimming around. All I could think about was the negative. All I could think about was all the terrible things that happened to me and how I didn't deserve good things. Clearly, I didn't deserve good things because I never had it. Clearly, I didn't deserve for people to look out for me. Clearly, I expected my fiance, or, my now husband, to leave me. Why would he stay with me? I'm nobody, who's going to put up with this with me?
How did you find that relationship after you have been in a string of abusive relationships and you had this narrative of love means safety, protection, from anybody that shows you that they have the ability to protect you in some way? How did you find your husband now?
So this is a very interesting story. I actually met my husband 3 days after that 5-year mind control relationship ended. We met through a mutual friend. One of my best friends was having a birthday party, and she was inviting her then husband, his parents, and his brother, who now I know is my husband. And originally I was like, no, I think that this is a family thing. I think you should just go by yourself. She's like, no, I really want you to go. So anyway, I went. And when he came into the restaurant, and I didn't know it was him, I saw him walk into the restaurant, and it was like time stood still. It was slow motion. It was like everything slowed down as he walked over. And as he got closer and closer, I'm like, who is this guy? Like, why am I like fixated on this guy? And he got closer and he stopped at our table, and Cynthia's like, oh, this is Matt. And I was just like, and it was just like an instant connection that we had. But at the time we met, he was also very depressed. But there was something about his eyes. There was something about him that I knew he was in pain. And I knew that he was sad. And I just resonated with that. And I think, looking back, if I'm being honest, I think it was probably a rebound relationship that actually worked out, that actually became, okay, no, wow, okay, maybe this was a rebound in the beginning, but no, this is actually true love. And the way that I knew that is consistency. He was consistent. Every day we woke up, I knew what kind of man I was waking up to. He wasn't, he didn't have his mood swings where one day he was mad and one day he was happy and one day he loved me and one day he didn't. It was every day he told me he loved me. Not only did he tell me he loved me, he showed me that he loved me by this man, when I was at my deepest, lowest point, literally waited on me hand and foot.
Was there a part of you that questioned that?
No. No. There's just a trust that I had with him that was almost immediate, which was so confusing for me because that's not like, right. I'm very like, usually I'm like, whoa, wait a second. But with him, it's just, he was so genuine. Like I just could sense it. But the way that I've always operated in the past is with new relationships, okay, this is how it is now. It's going to change, right? It's going to change. So I was just waiting for it to change. And once it changed, I would be able to say, okay, now I know. It really wasn't what I thought. But I was giving him the benefit of the doubt because of just how he was. You have to understand, not only me, my children. I had two daughters who were 7 and 10. He did drop them off at school, pick them up for school, made them dinner, made sure they had lunch, made sure their clothes were clean, made sure, I mean, just so it wasn't just me. He cared about us and our family and my children. And we've been together now almost 10 years. And that same consistency has been there every day. And that's how you know that you've found something true, that it's consistent, that it's comforting, that it's loving, that he supports you, he or she supports you, takes care of you, is understanding, listens to you. This man would sit in my therapy sessions with me and just to hold my hand in the beginning and would just sit there and listen to all of these terrible things. I know it wasn't easy for him, right?
Right.
But he did it for me. He didn't, he could have said to me, well, that's too hard for me. I'm not going to do it. But he put me first. He put my well-being first. And so it's just that consistency that I saw over time that I knew, no, this is love. For the first time, I had someone complimenting me and telling me I'm beautiful and, you know, telling me how much they love little cute things that I do. Like I love to sing and I love to dance and, you know, I make up songs all the time. And he still to this day just loves that, you know, like, you know, just like, you know, just start singing and dancing all over the place. And he's just like, I just love you. I just love that. Like I was accepted for me. I was accepted.
That is a big one. Acceptance for me as I am without having to change anything about me.
Yes, he loved me the same when I was down, when I was depressed, when I couldn't get out of bed as he does now. There's been no, it's just that acceptance that no, you can stay in your room, you know, literally isolating for 3 months, only coming out to get food and just to go back up. And I still love you. And you're still wonderful. And you're still my favorite person. Like it was that. It was not making me feel bad for where I was. It was, I understand where you are.
So how incredibly important was that to your healing process?
It was a pivotal moment because I finally felt a sense of worth. I felt I am worthy. I'm worthy whether I'm down in the dumps or I'm, you know, at my best. It was feeling that worth and that, no, I deserve to be happy. I deserve to heal from this. I deserve to no longer, you know, have to have such intense, intrusive thoughts. Like I knew that I could do this. I could do this. And it was at that point in my therapy, I feel that that's really when I started and I said, I've got to work. I have to write this book. I have to write this book. And, you know, and that's when I started talking to my therapist about writing the book. And I said, I want to write this book. I don't know if it, and she encouraged me. And she said, no, you absolutely have a story to tell. Because here's the thing, I was at a point where, because no one had protected me, no one had done anything, no one had ever, you know, looked out for me. I felt like nobody cares what I have to say. Nobody cares about my story. Who cares about my story? Who cares? But then I thought about that 10-year-old who, even at 10 years old with these horrible things, was thinking, no, they have to be doing this to other people. I can't be the only one. This needs to be addressed. Like, this can't go on. People need to understand what an impact this has on children as they grow up, and how it stays with them, and how it lies dormant inside of them until eventually it's going to come out. And either it's going to come out in unhealthy ways, such as self-medicating, with drugs, alcohol, other things. It's going to come out in self-sabotage, where you try to ruin every good thing that's happened to you. And I have to tell you, in all transparency and honesty, that's what I've been dealing with this past week. So even though I've been in therapy and I'm at a completely different place, you will still struggle with things.
Yeah.
However, now I'm aware of what I'm doing. Now I'm like, whoa, wait a second. That's self-sabotage. I'm not going to do that. But that's what therapy helps you do. It helps you identify, what is self-sabotage? What does that look like for you, the self-sabotage?
What are your patterns? Yeah.
Yes. What are your patterns? What are your patterns?
Did you find yourself at all, like in the writing of this book, finding that you're self-sabotaging, of like, maybe you wanted to stop at several points, or it was just too hard for you to bring up certain things of your story? I know that you talk a lot about the anger monster in there. Like, did you ever see the anger monster when you were writing your book?
Absolutely. The anger monster actually came out a lot when I was writing my book, because you have to understand, and I'm not sure if you've published any books, but the writing process, it took me about 5 years and many sleepless nights, obviously, to write this book. So over 5 years, there are so many things that you have to go through. So first my first process was, let's do a data dump. Let me just put out everything that I can remember bad that's ever happened to me. And then I will go back and I will, I'll put in the detail, I'll put in, all of the things. So the hardest part is you're really evaluating yourself and having to think back on so many different levels. It's okay. How did I feel about this when it was happening at the time? Now, how do I feel about it now as an adult? How did, why did my mom do those things? Having to relive and rethink and remember all of the times that I wasn't protected, and then it was going back in, okay, now how do I feel about my mom? Now that, how do I feel about my mom and all the things that she did through? Okay, now let's talk about my dad. How do I feel about my dad going through? Like, it's not just for your own perspective and how you feel about one thing. It's the whole experience that you have to really address and analyze, because you don't realize that you could say you think that you're addressing something of yourself, and you're like, no, I'm not angry at my mom. But deep down, you're angry at your mom. And that is there. And that's going to cause you pain. And that's going to cause you negativity. And it's just going to lie there until you confront it.
Now, so funny that you bring it up. I'm actually writing 2 books right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One of them is a nerdy book, like science-based neuroscience of performance. But another one is an actual memoir of mine. One thing that pops up over and over again is, if my family, or if the people that I'm writing about read this, what are they going to think? And how are they going to respond?
I think the first line in the book is actually, my biggest fear about writing this book is what people would think about me. That's my biggest fear. But of course, about what the family would think. My biggest fear was, what if they tell me I'm lying? What if they come back and they say, no, that didn't happen. That didn't happen that way. I was very afraid of that. But what I realized, this is my story. These are my memories. This is my life, how I experienced it. Sure, they may have experienced it in a different way, and that's their story, but this is mine. And I actually was very concerned about how my mom would feel about it, because I'm still at a point where I really haven't really tapped into that anger for my mom. I mean, I'm 42 years old and I still haven't, I just haven't. It's like, I'm just not mad at her. I don't feel like I am, but I know I have to be, right? I
Right.
have to be. So I actually had a conversation with my mom about it because I was just so concerned about it.
Right.
And I just had to have the conversation, look, mom, this isn't going to portray you in the best light, but I needed her to understand that this wasn't an attempt to bash her. I'm not trying to embarrass her. I'm not trying to do anything but tell my story. And actually, my mom is my biggest supporter. She is the one that actually told me, no, you have the right to tell your story. So I was so afraid that she was going to be like, no, what are you doing? But she's the one that was actually, no, go for it. I'm proud of you. Do it. And so that was really, really good for me to hear. I realized I needed that. I needed it, even though if I didn't have it, I still would have done it.
Right.
But I still needed it because it's just
It's
when you're
permission.
doing it's permission. It's permission
Yeah.
from somebody who has not treated you the way that they should to say, no, you have a right to tell people that I didn't treat you the way that I should. And that's the first time that anybody's ever been like, no, yes, tell whatever you need to tell. So it's amazing how these things happen. You realize some of your biggest fears, some of your biggest fears, once you face them, it's so easy. It's like, why was I afraid at all? And that's another thing about facing fears in therapy. It's like these fears that you think you have, you realize that they were only maybe little obstacles that you just needed to jump over, or something. They're just little obstacles. Um, so yeah, but having my mom's support was definitely a big part of it. And I also had my dad's support. I was very honest with the family. Everyone knew I was writing this book. I wasn't trying to hide it, and I had the same conversation with my dad. And actually, just yesterday, my dad called me, and he received a copy of the book, and he hadn't made it past the preface, and he had to call me and tell me how sorry he was for everything that he put me through, and that he's sorry he was an alcoholic. I mean, I'm so happy to say now he's clean and sober, has been for years, and he's not the same person as he was then. um, and for the first time, and again, I'm going to be transparent, I cried like a baby on the phone with my dad, and that for the first time was able to say to him, I missed having my daddy. I didn't have a daddy growing up, and we missed out on so much. And I am so mad that we missed out on that. I'm so mad that and sad that we'll never get that back. We can never get that time back. And I'd never been able to say that to my dad before. I was too afraid. I was too afraid. So, something to remember about healing is that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Nothing is going to happen overnight. It's a process. Things happen every day. You have new insights to yourself with new situations as they come up, and you just become stronger and stronger and stronger. So I don't want anyone to feel like, okay, I just have to go to therapy for a week and I'll be good, or I just have to go to therapy for 6 months and I'm good. It's a commitment. You have to be dedicated. You have to be dedicated to the process. You have to be willing to put in the work that is required to heal, because it's up to you. It's not the therapist. The therapist isn't going to wave a magic wand. And
how I wish that were to be true, though.
Right? Exactly. Exactly. And it's something that I say that could be controversial to some, but I believe it to my core. Not only God can heal your trauma, God himself can't heal your trauma unless you do the work. I mean, he can bring comfort, he can bring, solace, and when you need to pray and all of those things. But I find that a lot of people pray to God, please help me get over this. And they just sit there and wait for God to do it. God's going to give you a job, but you got to go there every day. You can't just
I mean,
get
I
a
can't
job.
just, stay in bed and
here?
not show up. Yeah.
Right.
Mark
Right.
Twain said, I've been through many things in my life before, only some of which have actually happened. And I love that saying because 95% of our thoughts are thoughts that we had from yesterday.
Yeah.
And a lot of the thoughts that we have are these narratives that we tell ourselves that we don't check in with anyone about. We just develop them and we believe them to be true. And then we get stuck in our negative thought patterns. And this is something that I do in coaching is I teach people how to get out of that negative thinking pattern in order to give themselves permission to heal. Because a lot of the times our negative thoughts keep us stuck and we don't give ourselves permission. And it's like, well, I feel this way and I get stuck in this feeling, but I don't know how to get out of it. Well, your thoughts, like, look at your thoughts. Are they negative? Are they self-deprecating? Are they sabotaging? Because how you want to do this is you want to expand out your thinking, right? Beyond yourself, beyond your trauma, because the trauma feels like almost like it's a tornado and you're stuck in the middle of it. But until you get on top of the clouds and be like, oh, I can't, you can't see much in the tornado. So you have to
be on the outside.
Yeah.
That is absolutely 100% true.
Right.
You can't, you have to, it's just things are so much clearer when you're on the outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. So such a good point.
Right. And I heard what you said with you writing your book and having these conversations with your family. It opened up a narrative to be rewritten almost because they were actually hearing you for the first time, and it allowed for massive healing. And it was like a catalyst of like, this is what I went through. And now they're seeing it from a different perspective and coming outside of their own tornadoes.
Absolutely. And I have to say this. So my book launched November 2021, and my mom and my Aunt Missy came to my book launch. And I was nervous because I wasn't sure how my mom was going to be. I wasn't sure if she was going to be kind of withdrawn, if she was going to be kind of sad, or she's going to be kind of, sitting off in the corner, like, she's talking about me. But I have to tell you, my mom was the most engaging. She had a smile on her face. She was working the room, talking to everybody that was there. She was my biggest supporter. And now she's starting to see her mistakes in the past, because now she's kind of out of it. And now she's like, I can't believe I stayed friends with that person. Like, what was I thinking? Now she's evaluating her own decisions, as I was growing up. And that's a whole other process of healing that someone like myself has to go through. It's okay. Now I've changed. Now I need to see that my loved ones are going to make the effort to change, that they're not going to continue these cycles, that they're going to see, no, this has to end here, and they're going to make the changes that they need to make to end the cycle on that side of the family. And my mom is doing that. And because of that, that gives me more healing. So that's something that's important too. If you've been in traumatic situations where, if you're in a situation like I was where, my mom was 14 when she got married, or 15 when she got married, but, she was very young, very abusive. My dad was very abusive to her. So she had her own trauma that she was going through. She has to heal from that, because that is part of the reason that she wasn't making the right decisions when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. It's because she was caught up in her own distorted beliefs, her own idea of what was okay and not okay.
And a different societal expectation back then as well.
Yes.
I think in that culture back then, it was quite common to see 15, 14-year-old girls be married and have babies, and kids are having babies.
And can I
when
just, and this is a little bit off topic, but I just have to say,
Mhm.
in my humble opinion, I just need this out there. That's child sex trafficking, in my opinion.
Mm.
When you marry off a child, because there is no, you can't tell me there's any situation whatsoever where a 14 or 15-year-old child needs to be married to a man. Sorry.
Right. And you had said before we hit record of like the grooming process that goes into that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'd really like to talk more about that because there's not a whole lot of people that knows what that is, because a lot of us still think that perpetrators are in back alleyways,
No,
that
and they're
they're
not.
at bars, and of course there
They
are
are.
some, right? But a lot of the time of the sexual assault survivors that I deal with, and my own trauma, it wasn't that person at the bar. It was
That's
not the
right.
person in the back alleyway. It is a covert, very manipulative, very cunning,
Yes.
charming, very subtle changes of behavior that is hard to notice in a person. So,
Yes.
what did you find that was grooming to you at the times that you were going through your traumas?
What was grooming to me? Buying gifts. They would buy me gifts, give me money. They would make inappropriate sexual comments to try to desensitize me to what they were really about to do.
Mm.
They would get me used to, they would say things like, um, this is normal. This is how we show love. But you can't tell anybody because this is a special love, because then it makes you feel special.
Right.
These perpetrators make their victims feel special.
Mm.
That's how they earn their trust and access to them. But one thing that I want to kind of add on to what you say, or what you just said about it's not, stranger danger doesn't necessarily apply. Unfortunately, 90% of the victims who are victimized know, love, and trust the person that harmed them.
Right.
Because these are coaches, these are clergy members, these are teachers, these are all of the people that you think you can trust your children with are actually the people that you can't trust them with. Because perpetrators, part of the grooming process is to earn the trust of the parents. Because when they earn the trust
Yes.
of the parents, they gain access to the children. And
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes, oh, I want to take so and so on a shopping trip. Oh, I want to take so and so on a special camping trip. That's what happened for me. And that became, oh, sure, that's so, because my parents looked at it at the time as my child's getting an experience,
Right.
not realizing that the perpetrator was grooming even the parents
Mm-hmm.
to earn
Mm-hmm.
their trust and to get them to allow them to be alone with them. So it was things like that. But something else, we talk about stranger danger, doesn't apply, and that it's people that something else that I want to make clear is that all children in this world are at risk of being sexually abused. This epidemic, it's sexual abuse and incest exists in every socioeconomic level, ethnic, it crosses ethnic and cultural lines, and it's within all religions and all levels of education.
It's 1 in 6 males and 1 in 4 females, and that's underreported.
Right. And actually, Lauren's kids recently updated that it's 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys now.
Wow.
1 in 3 and 1 in 5 boys. It's crazy. So, I want people to know that you, just because you live in an affluent neighborhood, or you have a good job, or you're a very religious person, or you feel like you're protected because of what you're not, your children are not protected. The only person that can protect our children is
Mm-hmm.
you're the only person that can protect your child.
So ask questions. If there's a person that's coming around a little bit more often than seems, appropriate,
Yes.
just be aware. Like, look at your kids' phones if they have phones, if they have access to it. Monitor their social media. Put the parental controls on there. And if someone wants to take your kids somewhere, say absolutely not unless I come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing. That is the biggest red flag. If any adult wants to take your child alone anywhere, you need to ask yourself, why does this person want to be alone with my child?
Mhm.
That needs to be the first question. Because here's what parents need to look out for. Perpetrators, if you notice anyone paying extra attention to your child, that seems to be very fond of your child. Maybe you have other kids, but they just tend to just like kind of, lean towards this one kid for whatever reason. you know, or maybe it's somebody that you invite over, for a pool party and they accidentally expose themselves. They're changing their bathing suits and they know the kid's there and, but I was just changing and they accidentally saw something, if the child goes and says something. Again, it's somebody that talks around, if someone speaks about nudity or sex around your children in a way to make it seem normal, it's another huge red flag. Giving gifts, money, clothes, trips, drugs, and alcohol.
Mhm.
That's another thing. And that's another way that I was perpetrated upon. One of my perpetrators got me drunk every time. When I was 12, he would get me wasted and then take advantage of me. Um,
Sleepovers are a big one too for single
yes,
parents,
sleepovers.
especially and oftentimes we think, well, it's the males who do it. Well, females can do it as well.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's actually one of the biggest points that I actually wanted to talk about after this.
Mhm.
Just a couple other things about these grooming techniques, and then I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Something else to look out for. If you notice any adult is making comments about a child's sexual development or talks about sex in any way that's inappropriate for the child's age, because that happened to me as well. One man commented, "Oh, look at you growing some bee stings." My mom was sitting right there. And because it was so normal, my response back to him was, "Yeah, yep, I'm really filling up." Now, my mom started laughing and she's like, "You mean filling out?" Because I said the wrong thing. But looking back on it now, it's like, why did my mom laugh about that? Why was it okay for this man to comment on my growing breasts? And this man eventually molested me.
Mm.
And so that was one of the first things that happened. Um, and just something else, if you notice anybody staring at your child, if you just notice, you catch anybody just, they may not do anything, they may not say anything, they may not, but if you just notice someone is always staring at your child, that is something else to pay attention to. Now, getting back to your phenomenal point, and something that I've really, in the future, I want to start a foundation called Survivor Strong Foundation that actually focuses more on men and boys who have been abused.
Mhm.
Because what you just said, one of the biggest distorted beliefs that I've found, that I've encountered, is that it's somehow manly or masculine or somehow acceptable for boys to lose their virginity at younger ages. And it's somehow they're even cooler if the woman is older. And I
Right.
hate to break it to you, but you've just celebrated your child, your son, being sexually molested by a an older woman. And this is
Mhm.
what I really want to talk about, because when it comes to, now we know that not all victims become perpetrators. We know that.
Right.
As a matter of fact, very few do become perpetrators, so it's very important that we say that. But at the same time, studies have shown the men who do become perpetrators actually admitted to losing their virginity to older women. And so,
Yeah.
what that creates, when you teach a child at a young age that a woman is just a sexual being, you've now implanted that what that woman is. A woman is a sexual being. I just need to try to have sex with women. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm masculine. The more women I have sex with, da 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 da. But really, these boys are being molested. And they're growing up thinking that they were just cool because they lost their virginity when they're actually survivors and victims of child molestation, and they don't even realize it.
And if I had a quarter for any time that someone came into my office and said, well, at a young age, my dad showed me porn and said, like, oh, I need to do this, or, oh, I need to look at it, or the comments on a TV of like, oh, look at her. And it's a problem. So females are being sexualized, but now boys are being sexualized.
Yes.
And there's a massive shift in the American culture that is just like, this is more open, this is more free, and this is more okay to do. And it's
this is because how often do you hear about child sexual abuse in the news? You don't hear about child sexual abuse. You don't have commercials all the time telling you, like they have the commercials of, save the animals and, all these starving animals, but yet they don't show commercials of children, sexually abused children that are living, millions of children right now who are suffering in silence because for whatever reason, it's like even parents are ashamed to admit that their children have been abused, because I feel like a lot of that comes from because then they feel like they're going to be blamed for it. So again, it's the parents who are putting their own thoughts and their own feelings before their children, because they don't want to be shamed. But these children need help. They are children who are being molested and victimized and raped and are being neglected, that they don't have a voice. So that's me. I want to be their voice. That's why I wrote this book. That's why I'm doing these podcasts, because I want to be the voice of all of the children that are silenced by it. I'm their advocate because I've been through enough trauma, rapes, types, incest, molestations, physical abuse, everything. Like, I really feel like I can relate and I could really offer inspiration and hope that you can go through unthinkable, terrible trauma and still come out with a happy, healthy adult life and family. You have the power to break the cycles within your family to end what happened to you. And that's what I did. I broke the cycle. My daughters are now 20 and 17, and they've never experienced any type of trauma other than the divorce of their parents, of course, because we know that's a trauma for kids. But any physical trauma, any sexual trauma, they've never experienced any of that because I stopped the cycle. I broke the cycle. I said, no, I'm not going to have strangers around my kids. I'm not going to allow my kids to sleep over with people that I don't know. And newsflash, I don't even let them sleep over with people that I don't know unless there's multiple people that's going to be there. So we have to protect our kids. It's our job. The only way to protect them from child sexual abuse is to supervise them, is to be present, is to know what they're doing, know where they are, know who they're with. Because 95% of abuse can be prevented. And I did say prevented. And I know that's like one of those words that, like, oh, prevented? Yes, yes. We can prevent this if we educate people about how to protect their children and what to look out for. Some signs and symptoms that your child has been abused, you need to know, is your child all of a sudden acting in a sexualized behavior? Are they also, very sexual all of a sudden? Did your very calm natured child all of a sudden become very aggressive and angry? Why? There are reasons why children change their demeanors and their behaviors. There are so many things that we can look out for, and those are just a couple of things.
Physicalness, like bedwetting. Are they regressing. 12 and like bedwetting,
sucking their thumb again? Or bedwetting,
or twirling their hair, anxiety,
self-harm behaviors. This, I want to put a huge asterisk on what I'm about to say. Children who self-harm are harming themselves because they hurt so much on the inside that that's the only way that they can release it. And if your child is self-harming and they attempt suicide, and you go to them and you say, oh, they just want attention, guess what? You're right. They do. They're telling you, I need your attention. Something has hurt me. Something has happened to me that I want to end my life. I need the attention of the people around me to know that something is not right with me.
Right.
Because so many people, oh, they just want attention and they blow it off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, that's exactly right.
That's what they need.
They
Yeah.
need your attention. They need you to go to them and say, what is going on? How are you feeling? Why are you doing this? What happened to you?
Mm-hmm. And here's another crazy fact is that when someone harms you, we often harm other people or harm ourselves in the exact same way.
Yes.
So if someone is online bullying, can we talk about that for a minute? Because we've been in lockdown with like COVID for the past like 2 years. And a lot of the times we're not out and about like we used to be. And so perpetrators have gotten really smart in that they're now meeting them online. And they're starting to manipulate online and use words and to get them to feel a specific type of way. It's bullying. And now they're being virtually molested.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. These TikTok accounts that, you know, I've seen young girls must be 10 years old. And you know the account's fake. They've got a fake age on there, but you know a young girl when you see one. But when you see TikTok accounts with a young girl talking about wanting to have sex, why? First of all, how did this person find out about sex? Second of all, how do they know about having sex? Third of all of these questions need to be asked because those are signs. Those are your children saying, hey, I've been exposed to something that maybe I shouldn't have been exposed to, you know? And it's just one other thing. Can I just say, for prevention, getting to prevention now, never force your child to hug anyone. And can I say, especially a family member? And let me tell you why. When we're young and we go to family events and there could be a creepy somebody, doesn't have to be an uncle, could be an aunt, whoever, your child doesn't want to hug them. You say, oh, you go hug Uncle so-and-so. Don't be rude. You have just taught your child that it's rude that they don't accept advances of adults. You have just taught your child that they are to ignore how they feel inside and do what the adult wants. You have just taken their power away over the decisions that they make over their body and who touches them and who they go close to. So it starts there. It starts that young. It starts in our own homes and how we conduct ourselves in our own homes and what we allow. And having those boundaries in your own home, that's where they're going to build up the strength to know that when I get outside this world, I have the same power as I did in my home. Because that's where you're supposed to be the most comfortable. You're supposed to be yourself. That's where you learn who you are. I mean, of course, you learn who you are outside in the world too, don't get me wrong. But as a child, you're learning your boundaries, you're learning your strengths, you're learning what you're empowered to do in your own home by your parents, because they're teaching you, they're raising you, this is what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So that is
personality development is within the first 3 years of life, and you're at home constantly. Yep.
And something else, and I know that this might be uncomfortable for people, but if you want to protect your child, you have to learn as much about sexual abuse as you can. You can't go into, well, my child's never been sexually abused, so I don't need to worry about that. I don't need to learn about that. You need to know what it is in order to protect your child from it. So,
and other children, 1 in 3. So you're going to know somebody.
It's not just that you You just literally read my mind. It's not just your child, but it's the children around you. Because, they say it takes a village, and it really does. We have to look out for not only our own children, but other children. If you see a neighbor child who you think, isn't supervised enough, or you need to protect that child, that's your job. And so many people, well, that's not my job. That's not my kid. That's not my family. That child needs you. Children need adults. Doesn't matter who they are. If my child is walking down the street and gets attacked, I hope a daggum adult will step in and protect my child. Like, why do we look at sex abuse or suspicion of sexual abuse any differently? If we suspect someone is being physically abused, we will report that usually. Why don't we do the same if we suspect sexual abuse? Like, we have to make it our business. Sexual abuse has to be the business of everybody. We have to take sexual abuse out of being, this private topic that you only talk about with your family and with your therapist. No. This needs to be a topic that we talk about with everybody because it affects everybody.
Your neural pathways change, and it changes who you are as a person. And it also registers into your DNA code. And then your DNA is passed down from generation to generation, which is where you have that intergenerational trauma that you were talking about, is that you get stuck in the same patterns of thinking and the abuse cycle continues.
Yes.
And abuse inhibits us to live our lives to our fullest potential. And so then we create a culture of, well, we're just going to continue to hurt and continue to cause pain.
Right. Because like you said, hurt people.
Yes.
Hurt people. And, but just getting back to the topics of boys in particular for just a moment, I think there's so much shame around boys and men who have been abused. I'm not a man. So I can't say this, that I know this for certain, but I imagine that for men who are abused by men, that could be with their sexuality. It could be a little bit confusing with their sexuality. If they end up, discovering that they're gay, am I really gay, or did this happen? Now, I believe people, I just need to make this disclaimer. I believe people are born gay, and I just need to put that out there.
Yeah.
But I can see how people who have been abused could question, could, wonder, am I this way because of that? Or, even in the other direction, men who they're so ashamed of it that they would never even mention that it happened to them, because they were like, oh no, nobody could ever know this, but they deserve to heal. Men out there, you deserve to heal. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There is nothing to be embarrassed about. What happened to you was not your fault. You did not deserve it. And you deserve to be able to talk about it and release that pain that you're holding. And so I really hope the men out there hear this, that if they have been abused and they've held it in, that they have the courage and they have the right to seek the help that they need for this. And I really hope that they do, because I fear that the people who, and these are people that are abused by men or women, by the way, just so you know, that the men who don't seek treatment, don't seek help for their abuse, those are the ones that end up abusing. And hey, I have to say the same thing for these women that abuse boys. They were most likely abused when they were younger.
Yeah.
And so they're only now abusing boys. And so it goes both ways. It definitely goes both ways. So if you were a young boy who lost your virginity to an older woman, you have to consider the fact that that was not a consensual sexual encounter, because as a child, you're not able to consent. You can't consent until you're 18. And so many times it's like, oh, well, I, younger people, well, I consented. I said it was okay. I was okay with it. Sorry, you can't do that. You don't have the power to do that yet. You just don't. So I just hope that people hear that if you were under the age of 18 and you had sex with an older person, that you did not consent to that because you were unable to. You were
And I
unable
really
to.
feel like the state laws need to catch up with this, is because and being completely transparent here, that's what happened to me. I was 16 years old, and a 26-year-old male, family friend, got my parents involved and everything. That's how he got off. Was the state law says, well, you were 16, you can consent, even though technically, I mean, that's statutory rape
That is
right
statutory
there.
rape. That
But
is statutory
in
rape.
the great state of Utah, it's like, well, 16 years old and you have 10 years. We were 9 years and 11 months apart.
Yeah,
That's how close he cut it.
wow.
So,
Wow. But so you mean
mhm.
to tell me because it was only 9 years and so many months and not 10? Wow. No, I totally agree. And
Yep.
also, and I know we're going off a little bit on topic, but also like child marriages. I think those laws need to change.
Mm-hmm.
That children are just not allowed to be married anywhere.
Right.
Like there's no reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if a child is pregnant, then that child was raped, and that child should not then have to be forced to now not only have this child if that's what they choose, but now live with their abuser and have them legally do what they've been doing to them.
Absolutely.
All those laws need to change. All of them.
I feel like
Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
I know. Like, let's blast this. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, Yvonne. I really just appreciate you so much being on the show and sharing with us your book, The Invisible Girl. Where can people find you if they want to have more of a conversation with you?
Absolutely. So my website, www.theinvisiblegirlmemoir.com. You can purchase the book. It's a paperback, ebook, and also audio book that is narrated by me. So the audio book is narrated by me that's now available. You can purchase all formats on my website. And there's also a form to reach out to me if you have any questions. But I'm also going to just offer my email as well for anybody who, just may say, you know what, I've got something in my heart that I just need to say to somebody that I don't know. I just need to get this off. I'm going to provide you this email to do that. I may not respond to what you send, but this is just a place. I'm giving this a place for anybody to just release. And so the email is just Yvonne.Sandomir@gmail. I made it very simple.
Yeah.
Yvonne.Sandomir@gmail.com. And yeah, I'm very excited. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And hopefully we can have another conversation because like you, I could talk to you for hours about this. I mean, we could go on and there's so many, it's so multifaceted, different directions that we could go with the conversation that, it's definitely, multiple conversations would be warranted.
Absolutely. Especially because there's so many scenarios out there now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you.